Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Talking Stuff on the Austin and Birm Show. I am Jeremy Birmingham. I will be joined today by Mick Walker of LettermenRow.com, a part of the On3 Sports Network, to talk about all the latest news, notes, and thoughts around Ohio State football recruiting. Let's get to the show. As promised, Mick Walker of LettermenRow.com joins us now. Mick, how are you? How was your off weekend? I know it wasn't, everything you wanted, because I know how much you love just being at Ohio Stadium and watching Buckeyes games, but the Buckeyes didn't play. You got on the road. You went to Chicago last week. Ohio State got a commitment from Angelo Smith on Sunday night. It just seems like a bunch of things are happening. And finally, after a couple months of relative calm on the recruiting trail, things are starting to percolate and pick back up. How does it make you feel?
Makes me feel good. Most importantly, we're in fall right now. We got our hoodies on. Got my nice Lettermen Row hoodie on over here. We're in fall. That's the cool thing. Now we get into football season. The actual big games coming up. Big Ten play like that. The pre-con, non-con, as you like to refer to it, it's over. We're on to the actual football season and fall's here. So that's all that really matters to me.
Now, it's been an interesting first 3 weeks of visitors at Ohio State. Obviously, the Texas game with more than 100 recruits, probably the single biggest game from a numbers standpoint that I've seen at Ohio State. Maybe not talent-wise. I mean, hell, I'll go back to the 2017 Texas or Michigan game. When Jeff Okudah, Chase Young, a bunch of other dudes were that was maybe the most loaded I've ever seen from a talent perspective. For a class in the 2017 class, that was the 2016 Michigan or 2016 Michigan game. So
you're getting old, folks.
It's the 2016 Michigan game, which had featured most of the 2017 signees like Chase Young and Jeff Okudah, J.K. Dobbins, etc. Anyway, point is, we're in a weird thing now because we really have one game at Ohio State for the next month. That Minnesota game is shaping up to be a pretty decent list, especially now that it's going to be a night game at Ohio State. We'll talk about that next week, but it's a unique schedule circumstance and the way things are working out here, where the Buckeyes will not be. They had the weekend off last weekend, and then they're on the road 3 of the next 4, so it's not going to be a lot of stuff coming into Columbus over these next couple of weeks, but the Buckeyes coaches have been active. They've made some new offers. They've been out on the road. Mick was on the road. You went to Chicago last week. Before we dive into Angelo Smith and his commitment, what was the number one takeaway from your trip to Chicago of all the players that you saw there? I don't want you to waste your time listing everybody you talked to. Just what was the one dude? Who's the one dude or the one thing that you heard or was said that really stood out the most to you?
I think I texted you right away as soon as I left the school. I think Ohio State leads for near 5-star tight end Brock Williams out of Libertyville. There was some buzz. You and I had heard that from people around the Woody Hayes Athletic Center going into it. Hey, we think we lead for him. We're in a good spot. Coming away talking to him, obviously we are a couple months away, maybe at least a month or so. There's just a good amount of time before he commits. But I think whenever that time does come, it'll be Ohio State, barring something unforeseen, because Keenan Bailey's done such a great job building a relationship with Brock, his family, coaches. Nate Roberts has gotten involved. The current players have gotten involved. They're doing everything they can. Brock likes how they've played 5 tight ends. The tight end usage, I imagine we'll see more tight ends this weekend. Heck, maybe Max Clare finally gets into the end zone for a couple times, or has his official breakout game in the Scarlet and Gray this weekend.
That'd be helpful. I mean, it's obvious that Ohio State is attempting to put on display the way they use the tight end. And for a program that has taken a lot of shots over the years at the perceived lack of usage at tight end, now they're running out for their 4 and 5 guys every game. But you're still not seeing a large number of targets and that kind of stuff for each guy. But that's expected when you're dealing with a wide receiver core that has Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis and all the other guys the Buckeyes have. But what Brock Williams, who, as Mick mentioned, is the number 2 ranked tight end in the country, behind Ahmad Hudson, a 6'6", 230 from Louisiana. Hudson visited Ohio State this summer and camped. I personally didn't see the hype there, but athletic dude, but pretty raw when it comes to playing tight end. What the Buckeyes are doing at tight end in developing someone for a complete game and being a real NFL ready tight end, that was something that Brock Williams said stood out to you, right?
Yeah, because it's the same thing. Berman and I will talk driving up on it in 6-hour drives. Hey, what should I ask him about? And the thing we kept going back to is you see the Nate Roberts playing fullback. You see Willis Kagmer blocking Colin Simmons. Brock can already do the wide receiver stuff, but does he see the vision for what Keenan Bailey's done with those guys as a blocker? And it seemed like he very much has seen that. He's already seen it. And it's a cool juxtaposition because he saw Max Clara as a freshman or sophomore at Purdue. Like he had seen him when he was young and just a real big wide receiver. Now, like I'm not going to use the words that he used because Brock dropped a couple of profanity words, which I think everybody likes to see from their tight end. But
he's a passionate player.
One of them was included in the story, but I mean, he was impressed by the way Max Clara blocked against Texas after kind of seeing him early in his career as a wide receiver. So like, yeah, the past, like the blocker development, what they've done, and you and I can kind of vault this into the next kind of topic, but just the relationship aspect of Keenan Bailey and what he does on the trail is the biggest reason why I think they'll land Brock Williams is he doesn't get outworked with guys he really, really wants.
Yeah, and relationships are why Angelo Smith committed to Ohio State on Sunday night. I mean, it's one of those recruitments where people, I think, would have just assumed he was going to pick Ohio State once the Buckeyes offered this summer. He came to campus, he camped, he was actually pretty impressive. I mean, for a kid who does not have the size of his brother. Let's be clear. His brother, Jeremiah Smith, is an alien, and he's, just a hair under 6'4" and 220 pounds. And Angelo, as a high school junior down at Chaminade Madonna High School in Hollywood, Florida, does not have that size. He's about 5'10", about 175 pounds right now. Fully expected he'll add an inch or two before he's done growing, but Mick, do you remember what you thought initially when we saw Angelo in the summer, and what makes him an interesting fit for the Buckeyes from your perspective?
Yeah, I just went back and pulled it up. He was there on the June 17th day, the last one-day camp there, and the first initial reaction is, oh, he's at defensive back, not wide receiver, because I think everybody would have been like, oh, Jeremiah Smith's brother's going to play wide receiver. No, he's at defensive back, and there are other DBs there that day that were pretty good, like Tavares Harrington, who I saw in Chicago, like Adrien, like Cole, who I'd like down in Atlanta, like a couple guys that Ohio State's offered. And Angelo Smith more than held his own, like changed direction, doing different reps and stuff. He did everything that you would want to see, what McArary wanted to see, Tim Walton wanted to see. And it's not super surprising, like you said. They might not have the size, but he still has some of that Jeremiah Smith, the Smith family natural athleticism that, like, if they could sell and like bottle and sell to like parents that were like elementary schoolers, they'd make millions off of it just because it's natural, insane athleticism. And you can see that on like when he plays at that camp or on Friday nights.
Yeah, and one thing that stood out to me about Angelo when we saw him over the summer was that as a kid in his situation, there was a possibility that he could come to Ohio State and camp, but really just be there to hang out with his brother and take it easy. But he was ultra competitive, constantly getting back in line, constantly wanting more reps. I think that might have been because Jeremiah was out there watching, and like he knows that JJ wouldn't have like wanted him to take it easy. But he went to Ohio State and he earned his offer. He did not get offered because he's Jeremiah Smith's brother. Buckeyes do not offer players for charity. They do not offer players. I mean, it might be different if Jeremiah was the 2027 and, Angelo was the 2026. Maybe you would try to do some finagling and take the lower ranked guy to try to get the higher ranked player on your roster. But this is a kid who has a lot of upside, very competitive, very athletic, just needs to get a little bit bigger. Until then, you can see him as sort of as that slot safety, slot corner type that Ohio State has been deploying. He told me, Angelo did, that he wanted to play safety. He said he likes it. It's like the quarterback of the defense, and he can see the whole field from there. So that's what he's being recruited as, although he was being primarily recruited by Tim Walton, not McArary. That's mostly because Tim Walton handles the South Florida recruiting on the defensive side of the ball for Ohio State. So that's commitment number 3 in the class of 2027. Brady Edmonds, Jameer Brown, and Angelo Smith is a pretty good start for the Buckeyes in that class. Starting fast is important. Starting strong is more important. The Buckeyes are doing that, but finishing strong in the class of 2026 is seemingly a bigger deal right now. Ohio State coaches did what Mick did last week and got out on the road when the Buckeyes didn't have to play last weekend, made visits on Monday and on Friday. The Buckeyes had practice Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so they weren't traveling. And we're trying to figure out what to make of the stops that were made, what to make of the guys that the Buckeyes saw on Friday night, what to make of the players that they saw on Monday. And the way it looked to me, Mick, and you can correct me or give your insight if you think that I'm viewing it wrong, is that Monday when Ohio State went out. It was to see the guys that they were going to offer, to make sure that they knew that the Buckeyes' interest was real. And, after a month of evaluation and watching tape, they wanted to get some face-to-face time with kids. And then on Friday, it was, hey, let's just see the best game we can. And if it happens to coincide with the player the Buckeyes are trying to flip, then great. We saw that with a number of players, a number of coaches on the road for Ohio State. Everyone was on the road on Friday with the exception of Matt Patricia, who was in Columbus and working on game plan stuff for Washington, I was told. The stops that happened, we'll just run them down as fast as we can here. And Billy Fessler went to Florida to see IMG and the 2028 standout Jaden Wade, a quarterback who the Buckeyes have had a number of growing relationships in the class of 2028 at quarterback. Wade has not been at the top of that list of guys they had to see. But I think now that they've seen him, he adds his name to a list of intriguing prospects at that position. And then Fessler went from there to Chattanooga, Tennessee, to see Luke Fahey and his teammates from California who were playing in Chattanooga on Friday night. Football's wild. High school football is crazy. What on earth is going on where Mission Viejo is traveling to Chattanooga, Tennessee on the third Friday in September?
Birmingham and I will hit the trail this spring. We'll see different high school coaches. And if you ask any high school coach about their upcoming schedule, the one thing everybody will tell you is that nobody wants to play them. So apparently somebody in California didn't want to play Mission Viejo. Somebody in Tennessee didn't want to play McCallie in Chattanooga. So they said, you know what? Why don't you come on out to Chattanooga and we'll play a game? That was their resolution.
I mean, it's quite a trip to make for a couple hours on a Friday night. But Fahey has continued to play well. Mission Viejo lost that game on Friday night, but he's been playing well. Outdueled Ryder Lyons, the 5-star-ish quarterback the week before, playing very well. Buckeyes are happy with Luke Fahey. Running back is an interesting situation that we're monitoring. Carlos Lachlan was in Georgia. He offered a new offensive lineman while he was down there. We'll talk about that in a second. But perhaps most interesting, Mick, is that he went to see Wisconsin commit Amari Latimer on Friday night amongst a handful of other players. I want to be clear. In Georgia, you don't go to a game to watch one player. There's 39 Division I prospects on every high school team in Georgia. So he went, and Latimer was one of the players that were playing. And I think we both received similar intel on Saturday that the Buckeyes were pretty
well. This was not you and I checking on things. This was just waking up to a text from somebody that would know about the performance on Friday night.
Yeah, that there was the Buckeyes were impressed by what they saw out of Latimer. And I don't know if it means for sure that the Buckeyes are going to turn their attention to a pair of running backs in the class of 2026, but the odds of that went up pretty high last week. Latimer, 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. He's at Sandy Creek High School in Tyrone, Georgia. He's the number 22 ranked tailback in the nation, 4-star, been committed to Wisconsin since June. He's a player that Ohio State obviously had a relationship with earlier, but now it seems like watching him play in person might have perked up the ears a little bit of Carlos Lachlan, and we'll see if that transcends to anything greater. Wide receiver, not a surprise. Brian Hartline was in Las Vegas to watch Bishop Gorman against Mater Dei, the high school of Chris Henry and Caden Dixon Wyatt. That's a pretty darn good game to go to. If you're looking for a high school football game to get to last weekend, that's a good one. And Keenan Bailey was back in Illinois. He was there on Monday to see Brock Williams.
No,
and
you flipped that. He went to Libertyville.
He was there on Monday to see Max Sutter. I apologize. It's the 2026 Alabama commitment, and then Friday went back to watch Brock Williams. And as Mick already said, I mean he's the top target for Ohio State in the class of 2026 or 2027. So the question now, similar to running back, is how real is the interest from Ohio State in adding a second tight end? Because I don't think Keenan Bailey, what you said being true. Like, nobody is out working Keenan Bailey on the recruiting trail. And I know he would make a stop just to make a stop because that's his job. But I don't think he would have made it a point to go to Illinois on Monday a week ago to see Max Sutter if he wasn't sincerely thinking about whether or not they needed a second tight end in the class of 2026.
Yeah, and there were some coaches like Carlos Laughlin and Billy Fessler didn't go out on Monday. There's a new rule like with NCAA is that they can only have, I think they have about 10 less days than they normally have every year. So they weren't out all week. But Keenan Bailey made it a point Monday morning, flew out to middle of nowhere, Illinois, Dunlap, Illinois, which is like Peoria. I guess it's not really nowhere. We'll be out in that region here in a couple of weeks when we go to Illinois. But he went out there on Monday morning, didn't have to. He could have stayed local, could have seen some more other in-state guys, but he wanted to start by going out there and seeing Max Sutter, which is not nothing, obviously. I think Alabama landed his recruitment in June after a good official visit. I feel like Ohio State felt like they had a good official visit, but ultimately I think it came down to kind of dollars and cents, the NIL figures that are kind of going around nowadays. And I don't know if a ton has changed on that front for Ohio State, but Keenan Bailey's certainly trying to reignite at least the relationship or keep the relationship alive as you kind of get down the stretch with maybe the Penn State game, a Minnesota game, some of these things on the schedule that could, maybe Max Sutter does pop up.
Yeah, I will not be surprised if Max Sutter makes a visit to Ohio State. I think that's the biggest takeaway. Greg Smith from Rivals on 3 said that he's based in the Midwest. He's close to a lot of the kids in Illinois. Has been hearing similar things, that there's some real interest from Max Sutter and his family in Ohio State. Said that the meeting was productive last week. And this is the quote I think is interesting, because this sounds to me almost exactly like the way Nate Roberts was talking about Keenan Bailey a year ago. And it was, I love him and how he spends so much time with the players. Easily one of my favorite coaches. We have a really good relationship. He's like my older brother. Like, that is a very similar vibe to what Nate Roberts was saying a year ago. The difference is that Ohio State has been looking at its roster at tight end and saying, well, we've got Max Clare, and he could come back to Ohio State next year if the Buckeyes really push for it, or, if his statistical output this season doesn't warrant the first round hype he's generated through the offseason. You have another year from Bennett Christian if he wants it. We don't know if he's going to take it. He's getting married. Maybe he's going to move on from football. Who knows? He's a big leader on the team. You lose Will Kazmarek. So you could lose Max Clare. You could lose Will Kazmarek. You might lose Bennett Christian. You never know what happens with the younger guys like Max LeBlanc. He has not played heading into year 3 and hasn't come close to sniffing the field. It's been passed up by Nate Roberts and even Brody Lennon, who played against Grambling State before LeBlanc did. So like the roster right now, which is technically one player over the limit in the tight end room or over the goal, could easily shift significantly after the season. And so even though the Buckeyes are already looking ahead to 27 and seeing a guy like Brock Williams and maybe 2 tight ends in that class because of D'Angelo White in Ohio, because of Jordan Karhoff in Ohio, like there's a number of options at tight end in that class, but they may end up needing or taking 2 this time around as well. I try so hard, Mick, when we do talking stuff to not really focus on NIL or talk about NIL, but ultimately the decision for Max Sutter, I think, will come down to that. Like, how much money can Ohio State make up? How much ground can they make up on what Alabama's offered? From what I've heard, it's a fairly stark difference at the moment, like 75% difference between the two sides, between what Alabama has put on the table versus what Ohio State has suggested they would have available for him. So we'll see. It's an interesting thing, but again, productive meeting, and Max Sutter becomes very much a real, like, let's not be surprised when he shows up on campus type of situation. Similar like term, productive, was used from a source describing to me the meeting between Ohio State offensive line coach Tyler Bowen and Clemson offensive line commitment Adam Guthrie on Friday morning. And while like I still don't feel super great about it, like there's big news coming or the dial has been moved all the way in the right direction, the fact that the conversation and the meeting was termed as productive was a fairly significant shift in tone from what I'd been told from sources a week prior. So I I'm not putting him on the same plane as Max Sutter of, hey, let's make sure we're watching this close. Don't be surprised if he shows up. But if Clemson continues to struggle the way they are, we don't know what happens down there. Not necessarily with Dabo Swinney, but maybe Matt Luke gets moved on from if they continue to look the way they've looked. Who knows? Anything's possible. But the Buckeyes are not done swinging for Adam Guthrie, who is a true tackle, one of the very few true tackle bodies in the Midwest. And I think that's what's got the attention of Tyler Bowen and why he felt like it was absolutely important for him to go see him, even though the odds are long against the Buckeyes for a flip.
Yeah, I spoke to somebody near the Guthrie camp on Friday afternoon or early Saturday morning. I was told the visit went really well from their perspective, and the immediate follow up is, "Hey, is he gonna? Does that prompt maybe? Hey, is he gonna visit?" And from what I was told, it was just that now you got to talk. That depends on what Tyler Bowen relays and how he tells the conversation went to Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni. So again, that probably traces back a little bit to NIL stuff. I don't know, because again, Clemson stuff is kind of finicky on whether or not they're paying big guys. They kind of have a culture where they can do some different things and lose more games than Ohio State, but that's a different discussion. I was told it went well, and now just probably ball kind of goes into Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni's court on how much they want to put the pedal to the floor on this recruitment.
Yeah, I imagine that will be determined by what happens with Landry Breed, who we talked about on the last episode of Talking Stuff. The recent NC State commit offer from Ohio State. Interestingly enough, this weekend, Landry will be heading back to North Carolina State for a visit. So it's kind of a big weekend for the Buckeyes on that front, even though they're on the West Coast. Landry Breed will be going back to Raleigh and just kind of getting a vibe check on where things are there, I think, after his visit to Ohio State for the Ohio game. If Landry Breed still leaves that trip to North Carolina State feeling a little uncertain, I would imagine we'll see an official visit scheduled for him fairly quickly after that. So on the defensive side of the ball, Larry Johnson did not go out last Monday. He did go out on Friday and Saturday, from what I understand, spending most of his time in New Jersey. That is where Luke Wafel, the USC commitment and 5-star defensive end, resides. He also stopped in to see Damari Simeon and the Buckeyes. Now, here's the interesting thing, Mick. So, I've written about it. We've talked about it on those shows. The uncertainty around NIL contracts, the uncertainty around what money's been paid out, how do we determine what a buyout is, et cetera. Take this with a grain of salt. I obviously cannot verify it. I can trust the source that told me it, but I cannot verify it because there's no way to verify these things. I was told by a source I trust that Wafel's representation has indicated that they did not receive or did not take any upfront money from USC. And that, because of the fact that there's been no upfront money taken, there would be no necessarily buyout language yet, because he's not fully locked in with them from a legal standpoint. Now, again, maybe there's some gray areas there. Maybe there's loopholes. I don't know. This is, again, the challenge in the NIL era when everyone has different contracts and everyone's different agencies and different lawyers have different terms. It is interesting, however, that's what people are being told. So, maybe it feels like a waste of time for Larry Johnson to go there and spend time recruiting Luke Wafel, but Ohio State has been, again, taking it with a grain of salt, and whatever it means, I don't know. I've been told that the Buckeyes have been kind of given the green light from Ross Bjork to get more aggressive. And find ways to get more creative on the NIL front. That's going to be required if they're going to flip Luke Wafel or Carter Meadows or any other pipe dream at defensive end. But the fact that Larry Johnson went straight to New Jersey and made it a point to go watch Wafel is at least indicative to me that Johnson himself believes Ohio State has a chance to eventually wear that one down and flip him from the Trojans.
Yeah, and like what I obviously Birm, very connected Ohio State recruiting reporter, and he's gonna get all this type of stuff from the Ohio State. Like that's what we do, that's what we talk to. But it's also worth noting, like James Franklin, Penn State defensive line coach, went out there on like Friday, Saturday too. So like, this is not just an Ohio State thing. There's clearly some back channeling, like you said, whether it's Luke Wafel's representation or the people at the Hunt School. There's some like verbiage going around that like, hey, nothing up front. Like, if you guys still want to like recruit, talk to them, figure something, like, we'll be listening. And that's obviously why Ohio State, Penn State, because there's plenty of guys. I think Ohio State went up to Archbishop Hoban last week to see Sam Greer. I don't think those same type of conversations happen with Albert Hill, who's in the same high school as what they did with Luke Wafel, even though that's Larry Johnson and Tim Walton or Ryan Day, whoever stepped up there. Like, those are different guys, but the conversations around both USC commits were vastly different from the way we've kind of couched it.
Yeah. So take that for what it's worth. I mean, take it for what it's worth. Take it with a grain of salt. Take it however you want. The point is Ohio State is efforting for Luke Wafel, and that does not appear to be the case with a handful of other USC commits that maybe people are waiting for them to make a move on, including other defensive linemen committed to USC.
One other guy Akeem Weems is a 2028 defensive lineman at Damari Simeon's high school. Like, he's going to be a Big Ten Ohio State Cowboy guy, so I imagine Larry Johnson got eyes on him. That's just
and the Buckeyes just offered another 2027 tight end from there last week as well. So, like, obviously, New Jersey has been very good to the Buckeyes in the last decade plus, so they're making it a point to be there. But again, with very limited time to get out on the road, and Larry Johnson not being someone that traditionally wastes a lot of time on the road, traveling to places that are just cursory or perfunctory visits, I don't know. Take it for what it's worth. James Laurinaitis went to Georgia last Monday and visited some recruits down there, including Alabama commitment Xavier Griffin. Then he went to Florida and offered Jacob Curry at Nice High School, who is a former Northwestern commit, who is now one of the hotter linebacker prospects in the country in this rush to signing day. Curry took an official visit to Oklahoma last week. Supposed to be at Ohio State next week. We'll talk about that in a second. Friday, Laurinaitis was at Massillon, or in Northeast Ohio, watching Massillon and Lakewood St. Ed's in a pretty classic game there as well. We'll talk more about what he did and saw there. Last Monday, Tim Walton offered Jay Timmons, a Florida State legacy, committed to Florida State from Pittsburgh. We'll talk about that in a second. Matt Guerrieri offered a new safety, Kamari Bing from Maryland, a Maryland commit, and then spent Friday watching Blaine Bradford play in Louisiana. Mick, so let's take a look at these new offers that Ohio State sent out. The most impactful one, or most likely to be immediately yielding something for the Buckeyes, would have to be Jaden Williams, the linebacker at Massillon Washington High School. He's committed to Indiana, about 6'1 3/4, about 210 pounds, freaky speed, freaky athletic. Buckeyes have been watching him for a couple months, and Laurinaitis, from what I'd heard, had been very, very fond of his style of play and his game. And as a similar conversation around Keenan Bailey and why all of a sudden the need for another linebacker arises, it just seems highly unlikely at this point that Arvell Reese is going to return to Ohio State for his fourth season. So you have to start preparing to lose Arvell and Sonny. And then there's you just never know what else can happen attrition wise. And so if you are looking for one of the hybrid will type linebackers like Jaden Williams or Jacob Curry, those are the reason that those offers went out last week. Williams does not have his official visit scheduled yet to Ohio State. From what I've been told, it will not happen the weekend of the Minnesota game. That's when Jacob Curry will visit. It will not likely happen the weekend of the Penn State visit, from what I was told, because Ohio State's going to have a bunch of 2027s and 2028s in that weekend. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of pressure from James Laurinaitis or Ohio State being applied to Jaden Williams, but Nate Moore, the really well-known and successful coach at Massillon, is very close with the Ohio State staff, and the Buckeyes are going to get a real shot there with him if they decide to push in. Now, Mick, the interesting thing happens here is what happens if Jacob Curry comes to Ohio State on October 4th and is blown away on his official visit, then all of a sudden that window might close. Yeah,
and credit to you. You wrote a little over a month ago at this point on Lettermen Row. You guys can go over there, read all the Birm's content, my content, all the recruiting content you want. $1 for your first 7 days. Go ahead and join us. But you wrote an article about a month ago that just said, hey, Jaden Williams is a guy, like, he was the header of the story. He was the main guy you highlighted. if Ohio State is going to look in state for some 2026s, Jaden Williams is somebody that they would consider looking at. And obviously now he's got the offer. And I've liked him since I saw him in the spring. He's not the biggest linebacker, not the tallest guy, but he's kind of thinner. He's an athletic guy compared to like maybe like a CJ Sana or a Sincere Johnson, who they already have committed. And I think he would be a good take. But then again, there's Jacob Curry, who vaulted into the Rivals 300 last week. Like, he's a highly ranked guy being pursued by SEC schools. He's quickly set up a visit. And from all the like interviews I read, the clips I see, he seems to be an Ohio State type guy, which we say a lot, which kind of means something, doesn't mean anything, or whatever you want to believe. But he's in that same kind of category. So it'll just be fascinating to see how his visit actually goes when it comes up here to Minnesota, because these end season visits, and you've dealt with them much more than I have, but those are the ones really, even more than the June ones, it feels like, hey, if a guy gets on campus, sees a night game in the shoe, sees Arvell Reese get a sack, sees Sonny Styles get a 4th down stop and hold his hand up and the whole crowd stand up and cheer, like, those are the moments that actually resonate with guys, making them want to go, this is where I want to sign with here in a month instead of the June visits.
Yeah, and again, the relationship with Nate Moore at Massillon makes it interesting, because the Buckeyes will need to be very transparent and upfront and direct about what their plans are, about what the conversations are with other players. So that's something to watch. But James Laurinaitis has options now at linebacker that he is exploring. Jared Doughty is a really fast rising offensive tackle from Georgia. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State have all offered in the last couple of weeks. He's already scheduled his official visit. He'll be in town on November 1st for the Penn State game. We'll see. I mean, I'm of the mindset that there's a chance with players like this, a guy that is becoming a national name at this point in the process. There's a chance he could go to Alabama or Georgia and get blown away in whatever place he visits before Ohio State and doesn't make his trip to Columbus. We'll see. That's why the conversation about Adam Guthrie is so interesting, or Landry Breed, because there aren't a lot of guys out there that Tyler Bowen is still really evaluating, but this offer was one that the Buckeyes just felt like they had to try to play catch up, because Doughty has been really, really good down there in Georgia this season and has put himself under the conversation of being a national recruit. He's at Banneker High School down there in Atlanta, 6'6" and 300 pounds, long arms, very athletic, like type of guy that just pops. And you're like, oh, how come nobody found this guy before?
Well, Georgia State did.
Georgia State did, but
I actually think I referenced him a couple episodes ago. I said, hey, Georgia's still evaluating guys in state. They just offered a Georgia State commit, and now what do you know? Ohio State offers the kid. Obviously, like you said, if you can get him on campus, you get him on campus and see what kind of swing that takes. But Georgia wants a lot of offensive tackles this cycle. They were obviously willing to go far for Jackson Cantwell, missed out. They got other guys instead, but still, it feels like they have a larger need for him, and especially if Ohio State feels like it's got a shot without him, Guthrie, like it seems like it might be building towards. That's probably where the resources and the energy goes to.
Yeah, and there's a number of ways that it unfolds. Doughty is the number 43 ranked offensive tackle in the country, according to the industry ranking. Rivals has him as the number 35 ranked offensive tackle. 247 has him at number 90 or 89. So there's a pretty large disparity. Some of that might just be guys that haven't had rankings updated recently or whatever, but it's interesting nonetheless. And then you get to the secondary, and this is where things get very interesting to me, Mick, because Ohio State has clear-cut needs at corner and at safety in this class. Tim Walton offered 2 new cornerbacks a week ago. That is, again, Jay Timmons, the son of former Florida State and Pittsburgh Steeler player Lawrence Timmons. A lot of people immediately saw the offer and said, well, why would you offer a Florida State commit who's committed to Florida State? His dad went there, blah, blah, blah. Number one, he's from Pittsburgh. Number two, I've heard from a few different places that the relationship that Timmons has with his father is not like, it's not like their BFF or anything. He's not really a part of his day-to-day life from what I understand. So we'll see if that matters. When I talked to Timmons before the offer from Ohio State, he was pretty excited about the opportunity and the possibility of an offer. He said that, you never know. His first offer was from Akron. He said, maybe my last one will be from Ohio State. He was pretty interested. So we'll see if he shows up on campus. I bet he will. And that could move quickly there. The Buckeyes definitely need another corner in this class. There still is a door open for Danny Odom, the Nebraska commitment, who Tim Walton saw play last Friday night. So it's just about expanding the board. And it's about making sure that the players you offer have the ability to play at Ohio State. And Timmons is one of the fastest rising players in the country over the last few months.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because like Michigan and Penn State are also kind of trying to chip away at him. Like he's a former Indiana commit. He's not a guy that just got the Florida State offer and committed the next day. Like he's kind of been around the block at this point. He's like committed to Indiana. So I'm fascinated. This one that you've kind of led the point on. You reported it first on Friday night that he had kind of like, or on Monday night that Tim Walton had stopped by and that he was like, there was good conversations. And the other one that I think you were ahead on, we just didn't figure out who was the Kamari Bing like recruitment and the St. Francis recruitment. Because it's funny, if you go on the Rivals, like if you go on Kamari Bing's Rivals like account or you go on his page and you click St. Francis to sales, it'll take you to the whole roster, or St. Francis Academy, take you to the whole roster. They've got about 4 or 5 Power 4 defensive backs commitments, and the lowest ranked, the lowest one on the list is Bing, but it seems like that's the guy that Matt Guerreri actually has the most interest in.
Yeah, and one of the quotes I've read from Bing is that he was told by Matt Guerreri that Guerreri thinks he's the best free safety in this class. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just good old-fashioned recruiting. The Buckeyes don't generally lie straight to kids' faces, so they must have evaluated him pretty high. He's committed to Maryland. And the most recent offer was to Rajon Duncan. He's a guy that both you and I had heard the name about a month ago as a player Ohio State was looking at. I don't know if the timing of his offer is related to the fact that he's a University of Washington commit, or if it's related to the fact that Georgia and Oregon offered him last week as well. So either way, the Huskies faithful, the Husky media has started to sound the alarms a little bit for their fan base that might be one that's difficult to hold on to. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. I want to go back to just the overall scope of what Tim Walton is trying to do here. The Buckeyes only have 1 cornerback committed. And again, you're looking at a roster that probably needs 3 in this class. So moving quickly on Timmons and then still chipping away at Danny Odom or adding a guy like Rajon Duncan, like Timmons, Rivals.com has him as the number 2 ranked cornerback in the entire country. Okay. So when you're talking about a disparity between the recruiting networks, there are very few places or very few prospects that have a larger disparity in their ranking than Jay Timmons. He's number 2 at cornerback by Rivals.com and number 28 overall. So borderline would be a 5-star prospect by the end of the cycle. And 247 has him as their number 247 ranked player. ESPN him as at number 266. So a lot of upside, a lot of athletic, genetic, interest and intrigue, but it's just about getting these guys on campus right now if you're Ohio State, right? So they just got to figure out when they're all going to get there.
And Kamari Bing will be on campus. I think you might have already mentioned that. He's
Minnesota game.
For the Minnesota game. So obviously that's a good sign. And as much as I know Austin has his feelings towards Mike Locksley and the Maryland program, we're not going to get into that. Like Maryland's done well at defensive back. They sent a couple guys to the NFL in recent years, whether that's late round draft picks or early round draft picks. So if you're flipping,
they recruit Maryland very well. They do a great job keeping guys home. But to your point, Mick, the fact is it's September 25th as we record this. He was offered the 20th, and he's going to be on campus at Ohio State less than 2 weeks after getting his offer. So for an official visit. So like there's a real interest there. That's not just perfunctory. This is a kid that has also visited Alabama because one of his teammates, Jarrah Edwards, is committed to Alabama. Like Jarrah, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Jirah would be
Jirah. That's one of those 3. But Bing is certainly worth noting. It's the first safety being offered by Guerreri after the loss of Braylon Womack. So it's telling about where Ohio State thinks Bing can help them. So we'll see about that. And Rajon Duncan is going to be one of those guys in Seattle this weekend to watch Ohio State play Washington. I will be there. Mick won't. I'm always fascinated by seeing Ohio State on the road because the way the Buckeyes are viewed by recruits around the country is so substantially different than like 99% of the programs in the nation. I will never forget being at Michigan State last year when Ohio State was warming up pregame, and all the Michigan State commits, all the Michigan State recruits, everybody there to see that game, a night game in East Lansing. walked out of the tunnel and stopped on the Ohio State side to watch Jeremiah Smith warm up. They spent their whole time watching Ohio State warm up instead of Michigan State, which is antithetical to the entire point of visiting a school. The Buckeyes turn heads. The Buckeyes capture attention. And Rajon Duncan, the cornerback commit for Washington, will certainly not be the only player in attendance that has some interest in both sides. Mick, are there a few other guys that people should know about?
Yeah, a couple guys that visited for the Texas game. 4-star running back Noah Roberts from Basha High School in Arizona. I know you lived in Arizona. Shout out Arizona.
Basha is where Damon Williams went.
Damon Williams and Miles Lockhart, who's on Ohio State. That's where they all went. Isla Wiley-Ava, I believe is how you pronounce it, from St.
I think it's Asala
Wiley-Ava from St. John Bosco, the 4-star safety. He's visited Ohio State a couple times. He's going to make the trip up to Seattle with his teammate Josiah Poyser, not Poyser.
A linebacker that James Laurinaitis offered 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and then the other one that I know Birm has his guys every class, and I think one guy that's kind of climbing up the board is Josiah Molden. He's a Washington legacy. He's an Oregon legacy. He's probably going to come to Ohio State again after visiting this summer. Those are a couple of the guys that'll be up there, and like you said. But the big one is Duncan, just because I was messing with somebody walking off the field at Ohio State on Wednesday night, and I was like, hey, if you guys get the win, you call Duncan on Sunday, and they go, yeah, just kind of a joking nod to yeah, of course we would. Since he's going to be there, I imagine he'll probably still hang around the facility on Sunday. But those are the guys that would kind of, like you said, be crossing over, probably giving a couple eyes to the Ohio State sideline as well.
Yeah, and there's we talk about players that I kind of circle in every cycle. Molden is one of them in the 2027 cycle. I just like his game. I like the genetics. His father played at Oregon, played in the NFL. He's got Midwest roots. His dad's originally from Michigan. There's things that can open up doors, and he seemed to really enjoy his time in Columbus this summer. But my favorite player that will be there on Saturday watching Washington play Ohio State is another Washington commitment, and that's Derek Coleman-Brusa, the defensive end from Seattle. That's one. If we were going to go back and highlight all of the little things that have gone wrong as far as Ohio State's defensive end recruiting in this class, Coleman-Brusa deciding on a whim to commit to Washington in the spring, it would have been at the top of my list of oh man, that sucks. Because that's just one Ohio State really, really wanted to get him back on campus. He's similar to Luke Wafel and Kari Wilder in a way that the Buckeyes look at him and be like, that's a guy who can play in year one. He's big, he's physical. That is the type of recruitment that does not happen 5 years ago before NIL. There's no way Coleman-Brusa would have committed to Washington right when he did. I don't think, without the NIL allure of staying home. So it's a big weekend at Ohio State for the Buckeyes on the road at Washington. Road game, Big Ten opener, all the things. But there will be eyes in that stadium on the Ohio State football program from the other side of the field that are also thinking about Washington, and always fascinated by how these visits, especially for a guy like Duncan, because, similar in some ways to the Landry Breed visit to North Carolina State, it's okay, now all of a sudden I'm someone else. I'm not the same guy I was a month ago when I was a Washington commit, and now you've got an Oregon offer, now you've got a Georgia offer, now you've got an Ohio State offer. You're going there with a totally different mindset this weekend if you're Rajon Duncan, which is to say, does the team that I'm committed to have a chance to stack up to these other teams? And that's why the Landry Breed thing is interesting to me, just because he's an Ohio kid. It's another thing that if in the pre-NIL era, this would not even be a conversation. But now you look at it and well, Ohio State's not going to value him the way that NC State does. So how much does that matter? How much, it's just fun. It's a fun world. Mick, we did not go to a position last time we did talking stuff.
We talked a lot about David Gabriel Georges. All right.
We did. We did.
Touched on the running backs a lot. Noah Roberts would be another guy on there, but David Gabriel Georges is the number one guy. Carlos Alkin will go see him in the next bye week. And that was by David's request. That's why he didn't go see him on Friday.
Yeah. But this week we're going to talk wide receivers because it's an interesting group for Ohio State. In the class of 2027, we're going to go position by position. That's the plan. Knock out all these spots over the course of the next few weeks. We obviously don't need to talk about quarterbacks because Brady Edmonds is committed. And if the Buckeyes decide to take a second, we'll be all over it. But for now, they're kind of holding steady with the idea of Brady Edmonds. And then we'll see what comes available in the transfer portal this offseason instead. Running back is David Gabriel Georges up here, and then everyone else down here. And at wide receiver, it's sort of the same-ish because Ohio State has a commitment at wide receiver from the country's top-ranked receiving prospect in the 2027 class. That's Jameer Brown out of Wayne High School in Huber Heights, Ohio. He is a freak. He is everything you could want at wide receiver. He's just under 6'1". He's about 200 pounds. He is faster than most high school seniors and a lot of college seniors. He is developing into a full-on wide receiver, learning how to run routes, catching everything, explosive in the return game, explosive in the run game if you want him to be, Olympic speed. He's got everything you want. He sets the tone for the class of 2027 for Brian Hartline, committed early, no worries, no stress. Got his giant Buckeye tattoo. Like, this is not a kid going anywhere else. Don't worry about the fact that he was down at Miami last week with a bunch of teammates from 7-on-7. Like, don't stress about that. Beyond him, that's when things get interesting, Mick, because the Midwest has more talent in the wide receiver position group than I can remember in a while. And not just the depth of talent, but the high-end, top-end talent starts with Dakota Garant and Manchin Sales, who are both top 5 receivers in the country.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this list, there's 8 names. There's only really 2 guys that we would consider like actual Southern guys, and the other one of them's from Nashville, which I think Ohio State could probably find a way to start claiming a little bit more of. But yeah, Manchin Sales, Dakota Grant, saw both of them in August. Both of them spoke really highly. They both returned for the Texas game, and they're kind of fascinating situations because Munchin's from Alabama. He was nicknamed Bama like when he first started playing football at Lawrence North High School in Indianapolis. I think he's tried to move away from that as he's gotten more offers to kind of be like, hey, I'm listening to everybody. And as a result, Brian Hartline's kind of slowly worked his way into becoming kind of the best relationship he has. He talks to his mom, he talks to his sister. Like, they do all the different things there because that's what Brian Hartline does when he really sinks his teeth into a guy. And like 6'5" to 100, like 190 pounds, close to 200 pounds. Like, that's what Ohio State wants out of all their like wide receivers in class. Like, can we get a big bodied outside wide receiver? Dakota Grant's not the same way. He's a little bit shorter. He's like 6'2". But man, every time we've seen him at like Ohio State, it's been awesome to see because he's an elite player. And he's obviously, his cousin's at Michigan. That one's going to be tougher. He's in Michigan, but Ohio State doesn't typically invest this much in the guys in Michigan unless they know they're going to have a legitimate chance. And that's what it seems like they've done with Dakota.
Yeah, and Dakota's invested that much in Ohio State. I think he's visited the Buckeyes like 6 times in the last year.
He visited twice in June in like a 3-day span. His mom came with him the one day. His dad came with him the other day. Like, everybody is involved, and I think both his parents love Ohio State on top of that as well.
Yeah, so because he wants to be a wide receiver, he wants to be developed, and obviously Michigan is going to do everything they can to keep him home. But at the end of the day, the Buckeyes are not going to be asking him to play for free, and Brian Hartline's reputation and legacy of developing receivers is unmatched. What you get out of this current group, and we're going to just talk mostly about Brown, Garant, and Sales, is that you kind of have all 3 levels of the receiver room covered if you were able to bring in all 3 of those. Jameer as the 6 foot, 200 pound, kind of the slot inside guy. Then you've got the combination guy of Dakota Garant at 6'1.5", 6'2", 210, 215 pounds, kind of the more of your Emeka Ibuka type of wide receiver. And then you've got Sales at 6'5", 220 pounds, like the big outside guy that will be the natural next up in line behind Jeremiah Smith, Chris Henry, et cetera. So like, you've got all 3 of those areas covered, but we also then have what has become the regular pattern for Brian Hartline. And it seems like Ohio State wants 4 receivers in every class now, understanding the way that they're used, understanding the way they're developed, understanding the way that they're leaving early. So that opens the door for other guys. And I think the one player, we opened the show talking about Jeremiah Smith and his younger brother, Angelo Smith. Brian Porter might be a better athlete than his brother, Quincy Porter, who's a freshman at Ohio State. Again, smaller. He's not the same build as Quincy, who is the 6'4.5", 210 pound wide receiver. Brian is closer to 6 foot, more of the interior guy, maybe like a poor man's Jameer Brown. But like, he's not going to be like super poor, like he's pretty good. Ohio State offered him after the summer, after a camp visit. And then one name that's not on here that we just have to at least mention has to be Eric McFarland, because the conversation about McFarland, who is at the IMG Academy in the class of 2028, originally from Las Vegas, like he is the wild card here. There's a lot of discussion about him reclassifying. And so you now have to pay some close attention to that, see if that occurs. The nice thing is it's not like if he reclassifies, he's signing in December. So you still have time to shuffle things and figure out how it works. But the Buckeyes will want to know in the relatively near future if that reclassification is going to happen for McFarland.
Yeah, and he's a guy, like, he would probably be, if we were stacking him up there right next to Jameer Brown, or like he's in this top group for sure. And obviously with that, when it comes to that, it's dollars and cents as well. But I think he's one of the types of guys, just knowing him mentality wise, knowing how he is with like some of the players on the current roster, and Brian Hartline, like, feels like they'd probably try and find a way to make that one as like necessary and as well compensated as they could when the time comes for that as well.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, he's tied in with South Florida Express. He's got the Adidas ties that, you know, Chris Henry and Caden Dixon Wyatt and Jeremiah Smith are all signed and representing Adidas. I'm sure that there's very likely a way that Eric McFarland will have that exact same opportunity when he gets into college. So wide receiver is always going to be loaded. Brian Hartline gets who he wants, man. So, and right now there's a small but growing list of guys he is interested in. What I think is most interesting to me about the entire recruiting process of the class of 2027 right now, Mick, is that Brian Hartline is learning and growing into being a full-time offensive coordinator, play caller at Ohio State. On the outside, I think people could look at it and expect that his dedication to the recruiting side of things might like take a hit, but that does not appear to be the case when you look at the relationships he has with Brown, Garant, Sales, Bowman, Porter, all these guys. So it's a testament to what Brian Hartline continues to do at Ohio State. He is the single best recruiting position coach in the country, and he doesn't seem to be slowing down.
Yeah, and it's not going to change. Like going back to my conversation with Brock Williams, which we talked about at the very beginning, like he brought up Brian Hartline. When we see David Gabriel Georges next time, or like when we talk to him, like I imagine he will bring up Brian Hartline. Like there's going to be resources spent from Brian Hartline, not only on these top guys for Ohio State, but also onto the other guys. And it'll just be fascinating because Brian Hartline loves to get on the road and see his guys. Like there's a fascinating story with Eric McFarland of like Brian Hartline was the first guy to offer him. He kind of went over like at one of their showcase days and said, "Hey, I want to offer you." And as happens like virtually most of the time, but this time it happened in person, all the other coaches followed Brian Hartline over to talk to the guy, offered Eric McFarland that same day as well. Like he's going to have to be spread thin, but he's going to still be, I imagine, the best position coach recruiter in the country, like you said.
Yeah, as long as he's a position coach and an assistant coach at Ohio State, the Buckeyes are going to be pretty good at wide receiver. He's got a list, and he's checking it twice. And other schools around the country are going to try to take him away from Ohio State, and the Buckeyes will have to answer those questions as well, because that's what happens. When you are successful in Columbus, people want you to bring that Buckeye juice to their program, and we'll see how that goes. It's going to be an interesting offseason for Ohio State. But before then, there's a lot of interesting things going on the recruiting trail. Mick Walker from LettermenRow.com has joined me, Jeremy Birmingham, on the Austin Birm Show. This is Talking Stuff, to talk about all of that stuff. And we appreciate you watching, listening. As Mick said, if you're interested in more from him or from myself on the written side of things, you can head over to LettermenRow.com and sign up there. $1 for your first week subscription. It's a pretty good deal. If not, you can always find us here on 97.1 The Fan, 10 TV, etc., to talk some stuff like we've been doing today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Enjoy that Ohio State game this weekend as the Buckeyes travel out to Washington. I'll be doing the same on Friday morning, and we'll see you next time on Talking Stuff.